Good morning. I'm going to talk today about the concept of the digital kingpin. Now, the digital kingpin is essentially a criminal that is enabled by a technology. It's a criminal that uses technology to scale their operations globally. I would say we could compare the digital kingpin to the modern day Pablo Escobar. Now, cryptocurrency is one of those technologies, and I've been investigating cryptocurrency-enabled crimes for a very long time, over 13 years now. Now with my company for the past 3 years, and then before that, in my previous life, I was a special agent with the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration. And as a DEA agent, I had a very unique experience in that I actually started the first federal task force at the DEA that focused exclusively on cryptocurrency and dark web-enabled crimes. And in 2022, I was the lead agent on the case that took down the largest dark web market in the world. It was called Hydra Market. It was a $5 billion marketplace and accounted for about 80% of all dark web cryptocurrency transactions. Now, when I first started at the DEA, and I started looking into cryptocurrency-enabled crimes, it was a very niche area of crime. It was mostly confined to dark web, drug dealers, cyber criminals, very, very early. We didn't have a lot of tools to be able to investigate these crimes, and we had to learn as we went. We had to create technologies. We had to work with the private sector to be able to trace and track cryptocurrency assets. Now, currently, it's a very, very different world in the sense that it's not a niche area anymore, and cryptocurrency has invaded every single facet of crime, and not just crime, but transnational criminal organizations, drug cartels, adversarial nation states, terrorist organizations are all leveraging cryptocurrency and other types of technology. Now, why are they leveraging cryptocurrency? So the first thing that is very attractive to all of these bad actors is it helps them scale their reach globally. So no matter where they are in the world, they can reach their victims wherever the victim is without having to travel and without a lot of infrastructure challenges in terms of payment methods and platforms where they can conduct their crimes. So for example, dark web is a platform that allows drug dealers to sell drugs to anyone in the world. So for example, before, if you're a drug dealer, you're kind of confined to your little corner of the street, or street corner, and that's kind of the confinement of your reach. Now, you can be the same drug dealer with the same resources and use technology now to sell drugs and poison to our kids all over the globe. So you're not confined to a geographic area anymore because you're able to use these technologies like cryptocurrency to be able to conduct your crimes globally. And one of the main reasons that they can do that is because cryptocurrency can be transferred without an intermediary, and specifically a subpoenable intermediary. So usually you don't want to use a banking system or a credit card or PayPal to sell drugs on the internet, because law enforcement can then subpoena those financial institutions and then receive information about whoever it is that's using the platform. Now, cryptocurrency allows criminals to be able to use, to be able to sell drugs and launder money without having to go through an intermediary financial institution or any kind of money transfer institution. And of course, allows you to transfer value across borders quickly and efficiently. Now, this can present a pretty big challenge because now, if they're using technology, now we have to use technology if we're in law enforcement, for example, to be able to counter that, because we can't show up with, sticks to a gunfight, right? So we have to use technology to counter their use of technology. Now, that's a challenge, however, it's also an opportunity. The only time that it's actually a challenge is if we keep our heads in the sand and we pretend like it's not happening, which a lot of us are doing, unfortunately. There is a lot of police departments, for example, here in the United States, when we talk to them and we ask them, have you seen cryptocurrency in your investigations? They basically say, oh no, it doesn't exist, or we don't have that problem, which is impossible because the problem is global. It's impossible for any good-sized police department to not see cryptocurrency in their investigations unless they're actively avoiding it, which actually happens a lot. Now, besides it being a challenge, it's actually an opportunity. The opportunity is if we actually train our law enforcement agents and officers, and if we equip them with the right tools to be able to do these investigations, we can actually address this new trend, and we can actually seize more money, more illicit money than we've ever seized before. It is such an amazing tool to know how to investigate cryptocurrency crimes, to know how to find, identify, and seize cryptocurrency, because if you do, you're going to seize a lot more money than a traditional agent that doesn't do cryptocurrency-enabled crimes. And now, when I was a DEA agent, I'm going to give you a little case study. One of my first seizures, actually my actual first seizure, was an administrator of a large, actually at the time the largest dark web market in the world, who we ended up identifying. That's the first challenge, is to identify them because they're anonymous on the dark web. So we ended up identifying this administrator. And the administrator is basically like the Pablo Escobar. He administers the market, billion-dollar marketplace where all kinds of drugs are being sold, fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, whatever it is. And so this administrator was based in France, in Paris, and his name was Gal Valerius, and he went by the moniker Oxy Monster. Now, when we identified him, we knew that he was in France, but there's no extradition treaty with France. So even if we did an indictment, it would be very difficult for us to actually arrest him and prosecute him. But by divine intervention, we looked up whether he's ever been to the United States, which he never has. But after 2 weeks after we actually identified Oxy Monster as Gal Valerius, we found out that he was about to come to the United States. And I was thinking at the time, this was a very long time, almost a decade ago, I was thinking at the time, why would a dark web administrator want to come to the United States? We had just jailed Russ Albright, who was the administrator of Silk Road, and he was serving a life sentence in prison. So there has to be a really good reason for him to come to the US. And it's because we're very strict on prosecuting dark web administrators. And so I was thinking, what is it that is compelling him to come to the United States for the first time in his life? And I knew from his social media profiles that he was very, very much obsessed with his beard and facial hair. That's all he talked about. And so I thought, maybe something facial hair, beard related is happening in the United States. That's the only reason I thought he was going to come to the US and risk his life and risk his freedom. And lo and behold, right across the street from the hotel that we knew he was going to stay in because we had his visa application, there was the World Beard and Mustache Championship in Texas. I said, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, if this is not divine intervention, I don't know what is. 2 weeks after we identified him, it took us 2 years to identify Oxy Monster. 2 weeks after we identified him, he was supposed to come to the US. So he lands in Atlanta. And when he lands in Atlanta, I knew that his laptop is going to contain all the evidence I need. And I already had an arrest warrant and a search warrant drafted, but at this point, because it's a foreign target, we had to have all our T's crossed and I's dotted, whatever the term is. And so we needed to get more evidence. And so when he landed in Atlanta, we ended up taking his laptop as part of a cross-border search. And when we looked at his laptop, we saw basically his little digital cartel. All the evidence that we needed was on that laptop. So We had his Bitcoin wallet, we had the Tor browser that he used to open the dark web. We had ledgers where he was actually selling drugs, and then also schedules for all the other administrators. And so we ended up arresting him, but there's a Bitcoin wallet on that computer that I found, but it was password protected. And so at the time, we didn't have a lot of procedures about how to seize cryptocurrency. And I knew there was about $1 million on that computer, but it was password protected. Now, his wife was with him, and she was about to go back to France. We didn't have enough to arrest her. And so I had to go get that money before she goes back to France, because she could have a copy of the private key associated with that money. And if she has a copy, then she can move the money even if I have the laptop in my possession. So I made a copy of the laptop. And don't do this is not a good procedure. I made a copy of the laptop, and I took the copy home. This was a holiday weekend, and I spent my whole weekend trying to manually brute force the password to the Bitcoin wallet. And I used various combinations of his name and date of birth and other things, information, personally identifying information, dogs, wives, whatever it is that I knew about him. And I would cross out the things that I already used, the password I already used, and lo and behold, after about 3 hours, the Bitcoin wallet opened, and I had the private key to that Bitcoin wallet. Now, we've never really done this before, and so I didn't know how to handle this. Usually you need a witness when you find high value assets, and here I am in my pajamas at home on a Sunday looking at $1 million, that because I have the private key now, I can actually take it, I can move that money, which is crazy. So I called my boss and I said, boss, I just found $1 million. I'm not really sure what to do. I did just take screen recordings of the entire time that I was trying to brute force this wallet. But now I had to move that money to a government-controlled wallet. So this was my first seizure, about $1 million. And then the following about 10 years or 8 years, I seized about $200 million in my career. And 99% of that money was seized in a very similar way to this time, without the brute forcing part. But I always found the money inside digital data that I seized, whether it be phones, laptops, cloud drives, email accounts, communications. I always found the money that I could take and seize right away on the spot inside the digital data that we collect. Now, this is a huge opportunity. Just 2 months ago, we seized $15 billion from a target, from a criminal who is across the world. We didn't even have to put handcuffs on the target. Why? Because we got access to the private keys. The vast majority of the billions of dollars that we have seized in criminal assets and cryptocurrency was because we got access to private key material. And how do we get access? Is by collecting, knowing the kind of data that we need to collect in criminal investigations, and knowing what to do with it when we find it, having the training and the experience and the technology and tools to be able to identify and actually know what you're looking at. There was a $3.6 billion that was seized a few years ago, and it was inside a spreadsheet that was a search warrant return from a Google Drive. And the agent was doing it the same way I was doing it at his house. He was looking through the search warrant return from Google, and he found private keys associated with $3.6 billion. Now, this agent was very, very experienced, and so he knew what he was doing, and he knew what to do with the $3.6 billion. He knew what to do with the alphanumeric characters that were inside the spreadsheet that didn't indicate in any other way that they were associated with $3.6 billion that he could take. That money he had access to. If he didn't tell his boss or somebody else, nobody would ever know that he found that money. Imagine the kind of liability and insider threat that is as well. If he wasn't honest, he could have taken, even 1% of that money would be pretty life-changing, correct? So the point is, we have to treat data nowadays like a high-value asset. And every time we collect data in our agencies, first of all, we need to create policy to make sure that when we collect data, we scan that data for cryptocurrency assets, especially for private key material, to prevent insider threats, insider theft, number one, and to maximize seizures. Right now, across all the countries probably represented here, we have a gold mine of illicit cryptocurrency assets sitting in evidence lockers that hasn't been found and collected and seized. And so there's a huge opportunity that we've never seen before that we need to go after. And we need to also make sure that we're preventing corruption by rogue agents that may be wanting to get tempted and steal that money. Because I've found dozens of times, I found seed phrases, private keys within data, and if I was bad, I could have taken it. $200 million is a lot of money, and probably nobody would have known. But we always have bad apples out there, so we have to make sure that we have the procedures and protocols in place to prevent them from stealing money. And that money can be used, of course, to fund the government as well. So if I leave you with something, it would be, if you are a policymaker, one of the main ways that you can actually get money for your country is to make sure that you make policy for all your law enforcement agencies to scan all their data for crypto and seize those illicit assets that can then be used to fund the government. And we take the money away from the bad guys and give it back to the people. And if that's not a good way to do it, I don't know what is. Thank you.